What's up, guys? Just hopping in real quick to direct your attention to the description box below. I just released my travel guide for Lisbon, so if you're interested in going anytime soon, be sure to check that out because it has all the tips and recommendations that you need to have a smooth and easy trip. So without further ado, let's hop into it. Lisbon, Portugal has always been high on my bucket list. I heard many travelers, especially Black travelers, rave about how great of a destination it is, not only to visit, but also to live. According to Travel Noir, as of this year, 2023, there are more than 900,000 expats living in Portugal right now from all around the world. This, along with Portugal's accessibility to other European countries, made me really excited to visit. Initially, I planned to spend 2 months in the city, passing the summer in Lisbon while exploring other European countries on the weekends. The cost of housing immediately changed that plan. I struggled to find a nice place to stay within my budget and actually ended up changing my dates. So I was there for just 2 weeks instead of the 2 months I had originally planned. This is also why I ended up in Croatia for a month. I ended up booking a shared Airbnb with a live-in host, and to be completely honest, I actually loved it, and I would recommend it to other solo travelers visiting the area. At $50 per night for a room, sharing accommodations was the more affordable option in comparison to staying somewhere alone. The apartment was really well kept because the host cleaned every day, and surprisingly all the guests were nice and respectful. Even though people would come and go, depending on how long their stay was, the apartment never got too loud or crazy. I was able to cook and work comfortably from the apartment, which was a plus for me since my job was on Eastern Standard Time, and so my workday ended around 9 or 10 p.m. at night. Since time was of the essence, I took a few days off of work so I could make the most out of my time there. It really helped that Lisbon is 5 hours ahead of EST because I had the whole morning free to do tours and explore the city before starting my workday. One tour that I did before work was a tuk-tuk tour I found on Airbnb Experiences. We visited popular spots around the Alfama district, learning about the history of the city and the story behind its 7 hills. Our little pink tuk-tuk made for a really fun ride. I appreciated the way our tour guide went out of his way to make sure that we had a good time and saw all the sights there were to see. Our little group made stops along the way to take pictures, explore monuments, and admire the amazing views from viewpoints like Miradouro da Senhora do Monte and Portas do Sol. At least I think that's how you say it. That's my best attempt at Portuguese. Next, I took a day trip to Sintra, a charming town on the Portuguese Riviera. Our group spent the day exploring the town's magical gardens, whimsical statues, and medieval castle walls. You seriously could get lost exploring this place. We saw the Tower of Higuilera. Then, of course, there was the palace itself, Palácio da Higuilera. Stepping inside of it was like stepping backward in time. Visitors were limited to only the first floor, but it didn't take much to see how majestic the place was. Every inch was covered with intricate details, from the mosaic tile floors to the carefully carved wooden ceilings. One of the biggest highlights for me was the initiation well, or Poço Iniciático in Portuguese. It's a dark and mysterious well with a super eerie spiraling staircase with 139 steps that lead down to an underground dungeon, also known as the Underworld.
And right now I really would like to have these like
The well is said to be symbolic of the 9 levels of hell from Dante's Inferno. Legend also has it that the well was never made with the intention of collecting water, but rather as an initiation process in the Templar Masonry tradition. Initiates would be taken to the well, blindfolded, and then tasked with descending all the way down to choose their own path in the pitch-black maze. Eventually, initiates would find themselves, if they were successful, at a bright opening with cascading waterfalls. This was meant to be a symbolic rebirth, overcoming darkness in order to reach the light. After exploring the historic center, we enjoyed a delicious meal together, feasting on a traditional Portuguese meal of soup, octopus, duck, rice, potatoes, and a variety of delicious desserts. We continued our way around the town, making stops at Cabo da Rocha and the enchanted Misty Forest, which apparently I forgot to get any footage of. Sorry about that. On the next tour, I got to learn more about the African side of Portugal's history on a walking tour around the city. A lot of the places we visited were stops I had also seen on the tuk-tuk tour, but this time around the stories behind what I was seeing were different. For example, take the São Domingo Church, a national monument in Lisbon's Rocio Square. On the tuk-tuk tour, we learned how this church had been rebuilt multiple times after natural disasters. However, on the African Lisbon tour, I learned that enslaved people arriving in Portugal had to be baptized immediately, and that this church was one, amongst several others, that was used to integrate Africans into Portuguese life. The church was also located near the blocks where many slaves were auctioned off for sale. Today, the historical impact of those times is still prevalent in the way many of the surrounding neighborhoods are segregated, with Black communities not having equal access to the same resources as their counterparts. Naki Gaglo, our tour guide, has made it his mission to educate locals and visitors on the full history of Portugal, making sure the African side of the story is not forgotten. He took us to a Black-owned shop that was rich with all things African. I'm talking about hair care products, natural soaps, herbs, oils, head wraps, and so many other goods that just scream blackity black. I love how united we are as a people through the types of things that we use. Regardless of what part of the world we come from, Black people are going to be Black regardless. We visited Praça do Comércio Plaza, which was essentially an epicenter for trading kidnapped humans. We also explored the São Bento and Bairro Alto neighborhoods. The 4-hour walking tour was really educational and eye-opening. I learned how religion was used as a tool to perpetuate racism, prosecuting Africans for practicing their own native religion in favor of Catholicism. Many slaves were forced through what Naki called Portugalization. Africans were forced to erase their identity in order to adopt Portuguese culture and language. In 1761, Portugal abolished slavery, but the law only applied to new slaves, and without anyone to actually enforce the new rule, Africans who arrived were still forced into captivity. In 1773, the country established a free womb law, meaning children born from enslaved parents would be considered free, but only if they could prove that they were a 4th-generation slave, which was practically impossible after being robbed of their ancestral history. In 1869, an official law was passed to abolish slavery, but it wasn't until 9 or so years later that Africans actually gained their freedom. Portugal claims to be the first country to stop slavery, but truthfully, with revolts rising up all over the world, slavery started to become less profitable and more of a risk. The country only decided to end slavery because it was the best economic choice, not a moral one. At the time of my making this, Portugal's current president recently stated that Portugal should apologize and own responsibility for their role in the transatlantic slave trade. This is a big first for Portugal and Europe. We'll have to see where it leads. We ended the tour with a delicious meal at a Black-owned lounge and restaurant called Mambo. I had jambo, a beef stew with rice, and a refreshing fruity sangria to wash it all down. Absolutely delicious. Cheers.
Nice meeting you all. Oh my God.
Is it?
Yes.
it's delicious.
I'm just happy to be out of the United States. I couldn't wait. I travel every year somewhere, probably since like my 38th birthday or something, I think. And I go somewhere diverse. I go there every year. It's twice a year. I stay there a few years.
Yeah, but that looks good.
My visa for Chile was like for 5 years, I think, and that one was.
I highly recommend this tour, not just because of the educational experience, but because it's also a great way to support local Black businesses in Lisbon. You can find the African Lisbon tour on Airbnb Experiences or by searching Google. Another memorable tour I did was a sunset sailing cruise. This was such a cool way to tour the city from a different perspective. We sailed past the magnificent Torre de Belém and then went up the river to the center of Lisbon to see all the main points of interest.
And then here you can see this building called the Belém Tower, or Torre de Belém in Portuguese. And this one is a cultural center where they have the biggest exhibition of modern art in Portugal before the Romans. And even on this corner they have a Roman harbor. They have some round arches made by the Romans. I can tell, like, Lisbon is older than Paris. You live in Paris, and even than London and Rome, because this was a harbor used for lots of different civilizations, and they found remains in this area with 3,000 years.
I sipped on wine and watched the day transform into night as we sailed along the Tagus River. It's truly a moment I'll never forget. After the boat tour, I felt like being out, so I ventured over to Time Out Market. I felt safe walking around the area at night, and the streets were lively with people grabbing dinner, getting drinks, or just being out and socializing. The food market itself was enormous and nothing like I'd imagined. It had a variety of tasty restaurants all in one place. There were so many options to choose from, I actually ended up leaving and just trying an Italian restaurant nearby because I was so overwhelmed with all the choices. Least to say, I was not disappointed at all by my decision. Lastly, I squeezed in a wine tasting at a cute little wine bar called The Vine. We tasted wines from various regions of Portugal, learning more about each region, its history, and its culture along the way. The Airbnb experience also included a charcuterie board with an assortment of meats and cheeses from all over Portugal. The wines were good, and it was a really nice way to learn and actually taste some of the culture. One thing I just could not get enough of during my visit was the famous Portuguese tart. Pastéis de nata are custard tarts filled with sweet egg cream and covered in flaky pastry dough. To be honest, when I was first introduced to them, I didn't think I would like them. Now my mouth is watering just thinking about them. So in summary, I absolutely loved my time traveling as a solo Black woman in Portugal. I want to go back soon and explore more in and around Lisbon. I really appreciate how easy it is to get around there without a car. Walking, ride shares, and public transportation are all accessible and fairly affordable. I usually chose to walk because it gave me a chance to admire the city's beauty. The colors and tiles and patterns and textures. Lisbon is a vibe that truly speaks to my soul in a refreshing, inspiring, and energetic way. Diversity is everywhere, in the architecture, in the languages, in sounds, in the people, in the food, in the viewpoints and landscapes. I really felt like I could just explore the city for days on end and never get bored. One thing I didn't like as much about Portugal was the prices for accommodations. Private rooms in Lisbon were averaging around $1,100 to $1,200 a month on Airbnb. Yes, I said room. Unfortunately, now with inflation and the state that the world is now in, this situation is something that's pretty much happening all over the world, so I can't really complain too much about it. Aside from that and Portugal's jacked up history, there's not too much else I can say that I didn't like about Lisbon. I have heard other travelers complain about the city's hills, and don't get me wrong, they are very steep. But having lived in other hilly cities like Medellin, it wasn't too bad of an adjustment for me, though I did catch myself feeling winded a few times. That concludes my experience as a solo Black female traveler in Lisbon, Portugal. Let me know some of the things you like or dislike about the country if you've visited. I look forward to reading your responses, and as always, thanks so much for watching. Share this video with someone you know who's interested in traveling to Portugal soon. Until the next one, ciao.